How do you make so many quilts? Do you just quilt all day long? These are the questions I'm asked often. How do I get so many quilts finished? So today I'm going to tell you all my little methods for how I get so much accomplished. I love to have kits, and I cut them myself. Sometimes I'm in a mood and I will just get some fabric together. This one is 2 baby trip quilts, and there's the pink one. And these are tumblers. And I've just cut them in an afternoon or whenever I felt like it, and I cut it into pieces and get it ready so that I can quickly make a kit that can be sewn together. So the cutting part is already done. The other thing I do is I keep things that are partially made. This was a mystery quilt and I didn't like it, and so I kept the triangles. They're ready to go, and I've made lots of baby quilts out of them already to donate, but that's what I have left. Having these baggies that are left over from former projects feels like a booster to me. I can just open one and have it be the beginning of a new creation, and I will take it and start sewing and make a wonderful baby quilt out of it when the mood strikes. Meanwhile, I like having this much done, so these are just leftovers from projects. Every year in January, I put these baskets together full of quick, fast, easy to do projects. I just look through. Sometimes I have blocks that are left over. These are from an aunt that donated them to me to make charity quilts out of. Sometimes it's just fabrics that I'll gather, that maybe there's 3 that I just want to sew and they go together, and I'll roll them up together and know that's going to be a quick quilt when I'm ready. So it's full of all kinds of different projects, those baskets. And then when I want to sew, it's so fast because I've already done the thinking process. I already know these are good fodder for a quilt, and I can just grab fabric and start sewing. So whether it's triangles that are already sewn together, or quilt blocks that I have from other projects, or just really fun fabric, I'm able to sew them together very quickly into quilts because the previous work has already been done. After I've had a sewing session and I have a quilt top done, or 2 or 3, I just put them in Ziploc bags and put them in this space here, and I save them up until I have a bunch. After I have a bunch, I go over to where my quilt backings are. These are all designated quilt backings, and usually I'll cut the backings and prepare them to go with the top in groups so that I have a whole bunch ready. When I get those ready, then I fold them like this. So here's the pile of quilt tops that are ready to quilt and the backing I have chosen for it, and I just simply wrap the backing around the quilt top so that when I'm ready to quilt, I can have a quilting day and I can quilt one after another, and it just goes so fast because it seems like, wow, how'd you get all that done? Well, I've been doing it forever and it just sort of piled up, and then magically it gets done so fast. And now I'm getting ready to pin them. I have a long arm, and so I have these big zippers that fit on my long arm. In an evening, you can see I have my comfy pajamas on. I sit and pin my backings to the zippers. Once they're pinned on, and I do 5 at a time, then I fold them and I roll them around the quilt top again, and I get 5 ready. So when I feel like quilting, then I can simply zip them on, quilt, zip them off. If I'm doing a fairly beautiful, simple pattern, it might take maybe an hour to quilt one of these, or less even, depends. So if I spend 5 hours, I have 5 quilt tops done magically, mystically, all of a sudden. This is just watching how I load it on my quilt machine. It's really fairly fast. You can see this one was made with leftover squares from a different quilt, and it's just such a cute baby quilt when I add novelty fabric and make it just darling for somebody's child. As you've noticed, probably, I'm sort of a by myself assembly line quilter. When I cut, I cut. When I quilt, I quilt. When I sew, I sew. And sometimes I'll sew 2 or 3 quilt tops, and I'll definitely quilt 5 at a time. Sometimes they'll be stacked up and I'll think, I'm just going to quilt till I get all these done, and I'll quilt 20. And maybe not in one day, but I call it my own quilting marathon. After the quilts are quilted, I trim them, and I trim them all at once. I take them, I fold them up in a corner, and then I check for binding. Sometimes I cut binding as I piece the quilt, sometimes I don't. This one I did, it works perfectly, there it is, and I just pile them up with their binding showing. If I need to, I'll choose binding and cut it, but I get every quilt folded and ready with their binding in a corner so that when I'm in the mood, I suddenly start binding, and I will bind and I'll just have have a binding session and I'll bind everything. And it's crazy because you feel so like you're so fast and speedy and productive. I do think there's a time savings in doing it all at once. Like if you're cutting and everything's out and you're on a cutting roll, if you cut a bunch, it goes fast. The decision making is already done. And then you just sew and sew when you're in the mood to sew. When you're tired, you do what you can do when you're tired. This is my pile of ready to donate quilts. This assembly line style of quilting really is a great way to finish a bunch of quilts at once. If you wanted to make quilts for all your friends, or you wanted to make table runners for all your friends or your grandchildren or whatever, try assembly line quilting. I really do enjoy it when I do quilts like this. It just feels so fast and so fun. I would love to hear in your comments things you do to make your quilting be fast and fun. I think I'm ready for a sewing session. Stay merry and creative.